Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishna Yevamos, Perek Vav, Chapter 6, Mishna Beis. Now, the previous Mishnah was discussing how Yibum can be performed even without intent, even if it's not a complete act of intercourse, and even if it is done in an unnatural manner. V'chein, now Mishnah Beis reads, V'chein, and so too, Haba al achas mikol araya shabatayra, regarding anyone that cohabits with any of the arayas of the Torah. Arayas are in Parshas Vayikra, all the kinds of marriages through some kind of relationship that carries with it the punishment of either kares, having one's neshama cut off, or a capital punishment. If there's a punishment of death that accompanies cohabiting with one of those relatives, either through blood relationship or through marriage, that's called an erva. Arayas is the plural for that. So everything we just said until now about the mistaken act of cohabitation, the forced act, the intentional act, all those apply to all the arayas that are mentioned in the Torah. And we'll see what that is exactly relevant to. I mean, it's relevant to a lot of things, but we'll see soon what it's relevant to. Oy psulos, or if somebody cohabits with any of the women that are considered forbidden to marry. Kugain, for instance, almana l'kohen gadol. A kohen gadol may not marry a widow. A regular kohen could marry a widow. A kohen gadol may not. So that is one example of a pasula, of a woman that it is forbidden to marry. Gerusha v'chalutza l'kohen hedyet, or a divorcee, or a woman who received chalitza from her husband's brother, the kohen hedyet, to a regular kohen. A regular kohen, the Torah forbids for marrying a divorcee, and the Rabbanan forbade a kohen for marrying a chalutza, a woman who had chalitza done to her, because it's similar to a gerusha. Mamzeres unasina liYisrael, or a female mamzeres. Mamzeres, or mamzer, is a child that is born from a union that carries with it, a punishment of some kind of a death punishment that accompanies it. That's how we paskin. That's the opinion that we follow. And a female who's called a mamzeres, she may not marry what we'll refer to as a regular Jewish person, nor can a mamzer, a male, marry a regular Jewish woman. So if what happens is, so if a mamzeres marries or cohabits rather, with a regular Jewish man, or a regular Jewish woman cohabits with a mamzer, and then we have another example mentioned, the Nesina or the Nesin. Now, Nesinim were a group of Canaanites who disguised themselves as non-Canaanites and came to Joshua, and asked to convert. Now, if Joshua would have known that they were Canaanites, he would never have accepted them. He actually would have killed them. But because they disguised themselves as foreigners and they got themselves converted, so even though their disguise was blown, after the fact, they are converted. At a certain point of time, it was decreed upon them, actually David HaMelech decreed upon the Nesinim, that they cannot marry they cannot marry a regular Jewish person. So therefore, another example of what we're talking about here, about a forbidden cohabitation, would be whether it be a female, a mamzeres or a nesina to a Yisrael, that's the forbidden female to the Jewish man, or bas Yisrael, or a regular Jewish woman, the mamzer nesina cohabits with a mamzer nesin. What's the ramifications of what we're saying? We're saying that what we said before about the acts of cohabitation, again, whether they were mistaken, whether they were intentional, whether they were forced, whether it's complete or not, we're saying whatever, and we said there it applies. The previous Mishnah, we said it regarding the mitzvah of Yibum, or the process of Yibum, that if the cohabitation is done in any of these forms, Yibum takes place, which means she becomes your wife. And now we're saying so too regarding all these other forbidden cohabitations, that these kinds of acts are considered acts of cohabitation. What's the ramification of that? Says the Mishnah, Pisala. You have invalidated her. Invalidated her means that she may not marry a Kohen anymore. So let's go through the examples and let's work it through. So the first example we had is, so like this. If a person goes ahead and, God forbid, cohabits with an erva, okay? Cohabit with an erva. No child born, just cohabits with the erva. Any ramifications of that? The answer is yes. that woman, because of the fact that she had a forbidden cohabitation, she becomes disqualified from marrying a Kohen. She cannot marry a Kohen anymore. Okay, she can't marry a Kohen. Next, we had the same thing applies to, let's say, a widow to a Kohen Gadol. There, the point is, she cohabited with the Kohen Gadol, not allowed. So from now on, can she marry a Kohen? No, she can't marry a Kohen. She can't, even though being a widow is not invalidating her. What's invalidating her is the forbidden marriage that she had. Another way that it actually, now, next example, Gerusha v'chalutza l'kohen hedget, a divorcee to a Kohen hedget. Now, that means a Kohen, a regular Kohen, cannot cohabit with a divorcee. All right? Now, even before he cohabited with her, he wasn't allowed to, right? That's the whole point. She's a divorcee, she's not allowed. So now that he goes ahead and does cohabit with her, what ramifications does that have? She's invalid anyway. Ramifications are the following. The Torah says that if the daughter of a Kohen marries, let's say, the daughter of a Kohen, as long as she's considered part of the household of her father, she eats truma. If she were to marry a non-Kohen, and that Kohen were to die, and they didn't have children together, she can go back to her father and eat truma. If she gets divorced, she can go back to her father and eat truma. But now that she cohabited in a forbidden way, she may not eat truma from her father. So therefore, even if she was divorced before, which means anyway, before she cohabited with a Kohen, she wasn't allowed to be together with a Kohen. The ramifications of that are the fact that now she can't eat truma anymore from her father. Okay, next.
Now a widow?
What? Excuse me?
A widow?
A divorcee.
No.
A widow to a Kohen is okay. Not to Kohen Gadol. Mamzeres and Asinol Yisrael. Okay, you have the Mamzeres to the Yisrael. Now, a Mamzeres can't marry anybody. She can't marry Yisrael. She can marry a Kohen. She can only marry another Mamzer or whatever. But the point here is that when this Mamzeres did a forbidden act with the Yisrael, again, what are the ramifications? Because she's a Mamzeres anyway. She can't marry, whether it's a Kohen or not a Kohen, she can't marry. So what are the ramifications here where we're talking about a Mamzeres to Yisrael? Ramifications here are regarding lashes, meaning it's a forbidden act. If there were witnesses and warnings and they did the act anyway, you get lashes. Well, in order to get lashes, the act has to be considered an act. If, let's say, they just hugged each other, you don't get lashes for that. But if, let's say, they get lashes for cohabiting. So now the Mishnah, everything we said before about in the previous Mishnah, about all these acts, these acts, intentional, unintentional, complete, incomplete, are all considered acts of cohabiting. So if the Mamzeres and the Yisrael cohabit, they're going to get, in any of these forms, they're going to get lashes for it. Next, the Bas Yisrael to the Mamzer and to the Nisin. Okay, in this case, again, she cohabited with a man who was forbidden to her. She cannot marry a Kohen anymore. That's the ramifications. Now, the Mishnah said Psal invalidated her. Sometimes it's invalidating her from marrying a Kohen. Sometimes it's invalidating her from eating Truma. And sometimes one of the examples didn't have anything to do with invalidation. It had more to do with the question of getting lashes for it or not. So again, the point here is that all the acts mentioned before are acts here, and the Mishnah concludes, V'lo chalak bein bia lebia. And again, the Torah does not distinguish between a natural act of cohabitation and an unnatural act. Both are considered acts of cohabitation, and all the ramifications of what we said until now will apply. One last thing, just want to point out, just to understand that the Torah forbids a Kohen for marrying a woman who's considered a halala. Halala comes from the word halal, which means desecrated, okay, profaned, and then there is a woman called a zona. Now, a zona in this context does not fall into the context of zona that is awfully used as a woman who is a prostitute. Here it means that a zona means a woman who had a forbidden marriage. So the point is like this. If this woman had a forbidden marriage to someone that is for a forbidden marriage that's forbidden to anyone, Kohanim, not Kohanim, right? Not just a Kohen prohibition to anyone. And she has that act of cohabitation, she's called a zona. That's her status. That's her status, a zona. The ramifications of that would be that, again, regarding lashes, you get lashes for act, you got to be warned, and you got to be warned about which prohibition you're transgressing. So you got to be exact. You got to know the term. You got to know what status, what exact prohibition is happening here, to be able to, and then give lashes. That's what I'm pretty sure. I mean, you have to say, do not transgress the prohibition of either being with a zona or a halala. I'm assuming you can't use one for the other. I hope I'm right. And then if, let's say, the woman's the act, the prohibited act of cohabitation was a Kohen type of prohibition, like the divorcee to the Kohen, the almana to the Kohen Gadol, there, if that act takes place, she's called a halala. She's called a halala. And let's say a regular woman, cohabits with a chalal, meaning somebody, let's say a man, someone was born from a Kohen married a divorcee, they had a son. Is he a Kohen? No, he's called a chalal. If you're born from such a forbidden marriage, you're also, desecrated, or you're not a Kohen. You're not practicing Kohen. Now, can that chalal marry somebody else? Sure, he could. No problems, no prohibition. But if he does, she becomes a halala. And she would not be able to marry a Kohen then. Okay.
And that's forever?
Yeah. All right. Now, the Chofetz Chaim continues. V'em echad ba etzlai, somebody came to you, mesaper lai inyanav, and he tells you what's going on with him. And in the conversation, he says lashon hara. He says something derogatory about himself and somebody else. He's coming over. He's telling you, this happened to me. And me and this guy, we did this. So he included himself in what he said. Nonetheless, now, we said before, if you admit you did something wrong, right? If you admit you did something wrong, you're allowed to believe it. Somebody admits to you they did something wrong, you're allowed to believe it. Now, in this case, he's talking about himself and somebody else. So the Chofetz Chaim says, the fact that he's speaking about himself doesn't help. Yes, you can believe about what he says about himself, but you can't believe about the other person. So if he says, me and so-and-so robbed the bank, right? So even though typically it takes, it makes sense to have two, takes two to do that typically. I mean, there are people do it alone also. But, he says, me and him robbed the bank, so you can believe him about himself that he robbed the bank, but not about the other guy. Have a wonderful day.
What is the definition of a halal?
Definition.